Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and this is not an April Fool's joke this time. Today we are going to be going over all of the troops that got changed as of the 3.0 patch, and kind of go over their viability as of this patch and which troops you should go for the refund on. So let's start with some of the most major changes. Of course, the one that was most anticipated out of any single change that was coming this patch was the Bone Dragon nerfed. Now instead of destroying all armor, it's only a 25. He does create one more skull than normal. It used to be 8, now it is 9. But its boost ratio is now only a 4 instead of the 1 to 3 that it previously had, and the armor gain is still the same. As far as how Bone Dragon is used now, if you are destroying 21 or less armor, it works essentially exactly the same as it did prior to the nerf. Anything above that starts to go down, and of course anything above 25 starts to extremely get reduced because he only can tier up to 25. So definitely a lot more balanced, still a really strong troop. He is available for refund, and I would consider doing so, as personally I'd find Keeper of Souls to be more viable in almost every situation now that they both have the exact same mana cost. It is still kind of nice to have his Frozen Soul if you are going to be using it, but overall, if you do only have like maybe a few traits in it, I would consider refunding it and putting it into other troops. Next pretty big change is for Gloomleaf. It has a 1 lower mana cost. It used to be 17, now it's down to 16. It also steals an additional 2 attack now. Instead of just stealing 2 attacks for all enemies, it now steals 4. The most major change it has is it now has Impervious over one of its traits, so it will be immune to all kind of things, most notably stun, because before you could easily just stun out the thorns and then not have to deal with it. Now it has Impervious, so we are never going to be able to do that again. You'll have to just take the skull damage from the thorns on Gloomleaf, so definitely a nice change on there to make Gloomleaf useful. Dracos got a pretty nice buff too. Ability is still exactly the same, but it is a 2 lower mana cost, down from 17. It also now has the Impervious trait instead of the Armor trait, which again, similar to Gloomleaf, will make sure it's a little bit more viable. It also makes all Impervious teams a little bit more useful now, as there are those 2 additional options, which are both legendaries. The other one is Carnex. Carnex, instead of exploding skulls based on its magic, now does a flat rate of 10 skull explosions at all levels, and now its armor, instead of just being an 8 armor gain, now is scaled on its magic at 3 plus however much magic you have. So this will synergize really well with his ability. This was something he kind of should have always had, but finally he has it now, because he'll be able to gain armor on his ability, which then feeds into his legendary trait. Before, he basically gained nothing towards his legendary trait from his ability, but now he'll be able to gain a pretty substantial amount of extra skull damage just off of his armor alone. So let's go into these next ones here. Here are all the mythics that got changed. The most notable one as far as usefulness now is probably Amnesia. Amnesia got its mana reduced from 24 mana cost down to a 22. That was the only change it has, but given that she is an exploder, that is a pretty big deal since she does cover 3 colors, and she can explode spam just a little bit easier now. Ketris also had the exact same change. It now has a 22 mana cost. This is still pretty much redundant because the ability itself is pretty horrible. Traits are towards the horrible end, so this isn't really going to improve Ketris's usage at all, but at least he's somewhat less useless. Plague got a fairly interesting one that you could consider either a buff or a nerf, mainly because it can now place poison as well as disease whenever it casts its ability. I say this because there's a lot of weird things that poison can trigger on, most notably a humility, that could actually be beneficial to the enemy team, but more often than not this will be a buff, as that will be a little bit of additional damage, and you'll just be able to reduce their HP, and he'll be pretty good when using him with the other 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And he also got a change to his final trait. Instead of reducing 2 to a random stat every single time you get a 4 times or higher match, he now does it by 3, so that's pretty nice. You'll be able to disable them even quicker on all of their useful stats. And War, who probably got the most changes out of all of these right here, he has a lower mana cost too. He got reduced from 24 to 22. Pretty much all the mythics at this point kind of got that reduction, quite a few of them. And most notably on his attack now is he gains an extra turn whenever he gets a kill from the damage itself. If you get a burn from the afterburn, that doesn't actually give the extra turn, but from the initial damage, if it does end up getting a kill, you will end up still keeping it on your turn. So that's pretty beneficial. His ability is definitely a lot stronger, but as far as traits, He in a way kind of got nerfed because he now has Inferno Armor instead of the 2 times damage to burned enemies. He does burn all enemies, which made it really easy for him to do twice as much skull damage, which made him essentially one-shot everything. He no longer has that anymore, unfortunately. He got it replaced with Inferno Armor, which is kind of a good trait, but it's not a good trait on War. It's just 25% skull reflect whenever he takes damage. One of the main reasons why this isn't too beneficial on War is he has one of the lowest durabilities in the game as far as the armor plus HP combo. So you kind of have to go with like a Cauldron or something to buff him up now, just so you can actually utilize the Inferno Armor. Still a lot stronger than he was before though, and if you don't have any traits on him, it'll be a 100% complete buff. Only the traits were really what got slightly nerfed, but yeah. Definitely nice to use a War now if you do have him on earlier on in the game. As far as some of the other troops, Goblin King now has a 2 lower mana cost, only 14, down from the previous 16. He gains 8 life, and now also summons a random goblin. Instead of just summoning the goblin, the little green one that you get when you first start off in the game, you can now summon anything that's considered a goblin other than itself, of course. So that's a nice little feature. The extra HP won't really do much, but the fact that he can summon a random goblin is pretty good, because goblins do cover every single color, so that means he could essentially completely resummon a team that covers every single color. For the most part, I don't really see me using Goblin King that much. This change won't really do much to make him used more, but if you happen to have him laying around, he'll at least be good to put on your team, since you can make an all-goblin team out of him now, without it being just completely clunky. So next we'll go into Dolgifer. Not much of a change here. He just has, instead of having the 10 split damage that he used to have, he now has his split damage based on 4 plus however much your magic is. That makes him slightly more useful, still relatively useless. He also got a mana reduction from 13 to 11, so at least you'll be able to get it a little bit quicker, especially if you're already using a giant spider on your team to be able to feed into him. Guillory, pretty nice change here. She is only used as a mech counter, but now if anything extremely strong ever comes into mech, she'll be a good counter for that. Her abilities and her steal are now based on her magic. Before, it was only the stat that she stole that was based on her magic. Now both of them scale. The main thing that's pretty good about this is she does deal double damage to mechs, and before she had a static 10, meaning she could only do 20 damage to them. Now she can get quite a bit of additional damage by the magic that she steals and just from her base damage in general. And that, I believe, was the only change that happened to her. Oh, one lower mana cost, I believe, too. From 14 to 13, forgot about that. Tank Bot, only change it got is it now steals armor based on its magic, which is pretty nice. So it deals damage as well as the armor steals, so that kind of makes it almost true damage at this point if they have a low enough armor, since you can just hit right straight into them if you steal all of their armor away. So he's going to be able to get pretty tanky, as a tank bot should be able to. That's a pretty substantial amount of armor steal. It's not as much as a Gloomleaf is going to steal overall, but as far as a single target steal, that's even more than, or if you have a lot of magic, that's even more than how much a Bone Dragon will do now that it got a bit nerfed. And now the final little few. Marsh Raptor, still kind of useless. The only change it got is that it now does a 8 blue creation whenever it gets a kill instead of the stats that it had previously. This somewhat synergizes with its Water Link. Still, overall, you don't really need it. I would definitely refund it if you happen to have any traits into this, and put it into Ranger if you haven't already. Ranger is vastly superior to a Marsh Raptor, and this troop is pretty much still useless even after exchange, so definitely refund it. Rock, even though it has a refund option, got a pretty decent buff. It now deals, or the amount of attack and life it gains is now scaled on its magic, which is really good, because before it was at a static number that was relatively low, that wasn't really useful. Now you can just buff it up with magic and it gets some really huge gains. It doesn't have the arcane anymore though, that used to give it additional magic. This got replaced for armor instead, just to make sure you couldn't just stack it out like crazy, but you can still buff it up with anything else that can give it magic, and it'll be good to go. And lastly, just a small change to Shadowblade. He now has 2 additional base damage onto him, so that'll make it a little bit easier to spam down the enemies. I forget exactly what this value may be when I fully get to Mythic, but I believe the cap as of currently is around 25, 24, 25 would be his final damage, so a little bit useful. I don't really foresee using him too much. He's definitely really good with Giant Spider. He's actually really good within his own kingdom as well. Currently, I don't see much usage for him, but at least he did get that nice buff, so when he does start getting used with true damage, he'll be a little bit more useful than what he was before. And of course, if you do want to look at all the refunds, troops that are available for refund, you can just type in the refund whenever they are available. And just to go over which ones you should and shouldn't: Bone Dragon you should, Dracos you shouldn't, Gloomleaf you shouldn't, Marshraptor you should, and Rock, it really just depends if you want it or not. Not really much got changed with him as far as traits other than the arcane thing. He's already a common, so you're barely even getting anything back from refunding it anyways. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for this video. If you guys have any other questions about the troop changes that have occurred as the 3.0 patch or anything else related to it, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.